Awesome. Hi, I'm Chelsea Comas. I'm the project lead for the design sprint through IDEA, and we're partnering with the Center for Adult Autism and Profit to uh, sorry, to approach the problem of inclusivity of neurodiversity at Rutgers. So I have a team of six students that work for us, including Claudia Santa Cruz, Thomas Morak, Kevin Wang, Naz Deshek Indigar, and Mahir. Sorry. And together we came up with a problem statement that reads, the neurodiverse population at Rutgers is growing, yet historically underserved community. Autistic college students, staff, and faculty face many obstacles, including difficulties with social situations, executive functioning, and sensory challenges. And while many have great strengths, may not be recognized because that person is not properly supported. And through the problem statement, we developed a hypothesis that led our research, which includes that if we combat the stigma around neurodiversity, then there will be an increase in inclusivity within the university community without overstepping their line of independence. And during this design sprint, we had three main objectives: to understand the neurodiverse community, identify its barriers, and then after, propose proper solutions. And through our research, we recognized four common themes similar to the task force here. About one of the themes were peer acceptance and the correlations to the lack of understanding and education within the college community as a whole. There also was the theme of the anxiety related to the transition to college because of the lack of support and social pressures. There was also a theme of lack of proper social services to prepare students for the workplace. And lastly, the use of communication, whether in person or online, in the neurodiverse community. So to confirm these themes, we created a survey that takes about 5 minutes, and we targeted the neurodiverse student, faculty, and staff here at Rutgers, not only here at New Brunswick, but it's open to all campuses. And the survey itself focuses mainly on communications, the stigma associated in neurodiversity, and the support services and its problems in the community. And then with this survey, we seek to understand the barriers that the neurodiverse communities face, and the results of the survey will be used to analyze and establish patterns that we use to inform our solutions. Now, when talking about next steps for our design sprint, we wanted to create a focus group to again confirm the barriers that we have established through our research, and use these barriers and the feedback we get from the community to publish proposed solutions, and then later work with the Center of Adult Autism for the implementation and further development of existing programs. And if you have time, you can take our 5-minute survey because we are still running it, and there's the link in the QR code. And if you have any questions, you can reach out to me or my team here. Thank you.
So important to put into context. So Chelsea is leading a team of students through the Rutgers Innovation, Design, and Entrepreneurship Academy. These students have volunteered to take on this task that has begun kind of in an overlapping way with our Neurodiversity Task Force. And over the next several weeks, they're going to be doing this parallel student-led project to contribute to the kind of culmination of the work of the task force and this separate independent student-led process. So we'll definitely put the QR code back up on the screen towards the end. So for those of you that maybe are too far away or can't get it from where you're sitting, can come up and definitely scan that, because it would be an enormous help to the project, the task force, the IDEA sprint design challenge, if you guys would all participate. All right. So now it is again my extreme pleasure to introduce Chief Kenneth Kopp, who is the chief of Rutgers Police Department, to talk about his role on the Neurodiversity Task Force and his ongoing commitment and dedication, not only his but the entire RUPD's commitment to compassionate community policing for neurodiverse people, and all of the training and research and partnership that will likely go along with that. Without further ado, Chief Kenneth Kopp.
Thanks, everybody. Just a little bit about myself. I've been at Rutgers for 27 years. Just prior to that, I was a student here for 4. So about 31 years here, both as a student and as a staff member here. I basically oversee everything public safety related. I work within the division of IP&O. And ultimately, our job is to ensure a safe and accessible community for everyone. And that means everyone. But how do you ensure a safe community if you don't know that much about a portion of the community? And so that's kind of why I'm here, and that's why I'm part of the task force. So, one of the things that I'm so impressed with is with how open and honest everyone is. And that to me just equals brave people. All right. And I saw some of the bravest people come up here and talk about something in the past wasn't talked about. And that's how we solve problems, right? We solve problems by being open and honest. I'm going to come up here and tell you, I didn't know a whole lot about autism or about neurodiversity as a whole. Okay. And the more and more we talk about it, the more and more I know it's out there. Okay. Because when we talk about it, I now have officers coming up to me and saying, my son or daughter is autistic and I want to be a part of this. So it's like a rally call, So we do small events like this. It's going to grow and grow and grow. And I've seen things grow in the community policing realm. We've started a good neighbor program, or we went door to door in the off-campus community. We visit thousands of residents in the fall semester, and it's kind of the fall kickoff. So it started very grassroots, very small. And I think that's where we want to get with this. So in policing a community that's diverse, we need to work with the neurodiverse community. Okay. And there's training out there for law enforcement now, but it's sit down and watch a video training. Okay. And we all know how ineffective that can be. But when we actually, from the grassroots, build the training with members of the neurodiverse community, how effective could that be? And when I use the officers who are parents of people who are neurodiverse, is their heart and soul going to be in that? It sure is. So that's kind of the goal, is to bring everybody together from the neurodiverse perspective and from the law enforcement perspective, come together, understand each other. One of the videos we see in the video training is someone stimming. Okay, and it's a real life incident that happened. An officer is put in a park, and there's a lot of drug activity going on in the park. And there's a neurodiverse individual who's stimming and is kind of shaking his hands and rapid movements. The officer, under the guise that he's there to watch for drug activity, thinks that person is under the influence of drugs and is now suspicious. Okay. That interaction did not go well. Okay. Well, let's leave it at that. And I just think those are things that are so avoidable through some very, very basic understandings that we need to do this. Plus with the neurodiverse community burgeoning here at Rutgers and with the center, what better place to do it? So, that's ultimately our goal. It's a work in progress, and I look forward to talking to everyone today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. And again, I can't express how much it means that you're taking the time to be here and that RUPD has such a strong commitment to proactively reaching out and partnering with neurodiverse people in the development and implementation of their training, because that hasn't been the case, I think, in policing in the past. And it's really promising to hear, what we could potentially accomplish together moving forward. So next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Rong D. So Dr. D and I actually connected, over the years, actually, I'd say, with Dr. D in the position of a family member of some adult children on the spectrum, and Dr. D being faculty here at Rutgers, senior faculty, looking for resources, and us kind of being in a position where there really wasn't kind of the infrastructure or the framework, for me or anyone from our center to be a liaison, to someone who was within the Rutgers community. We have all of these amazing clinical resources and centers and researchers and clinicians and medical places for neurodiverse people. But to this point, there's no really central community resource group where members of our community, like staff, faculty, and students, can call one central number or get in touch with one central person to help refer them to get the care that they need. So Dr. D is here to speak from that parent perspective.
Thank you so much, Chris. Really, thank you for the invitation. And this is a fantastic, I call it a little meeting here or conference. And I actually have learned a lot about this task force and the center. So as Chris said, I've known him for more than 10 years. But I want to talk about the family side and the part that he talked about a little bit later, but it's a professor here. I am in the Department of Plant Biology. I want to talk a little bit about the education side and the teaching, because we have students here and also former students here. So just to let you know a bit of the experience, and I hope that we can figure out something. So first of all, with my husband and I, we have 3 kids, and the first one is Andy, who is 31 years old now. The second one is Cindy, 26. She's totally on her own, graduated with double degree, found her own job, found her own husband also. And the third one is 21-year-old, and that's the one that I really trying to find something for him. So I will talk about that a little bit later, but it's a professor here in Rutgers in our program. I'm in plant biology and also biotechnology. I want to tell you my experience. So to show you how I kind of understand and using our whatever we can to help the students to learn. And then you will see how I'm concerned about my own kids and where the perspective will come from. So one year I teach something called Methods and Applications in Molecular Biology. I had a student after the midterm, he scored like 54 points. So I always talk to each one of those students who did poorly in the exam just to figure out what went wrong. And that student was always very jumpy. And when the semester started, we have the lab course and we divide them into sections. And he came to me, he said, "Look, Dr. D, I am in a D group." I said, "Yes, you are in D, A, B, C, D. We have A, B, C, D, E, F." He said, No, I'm in a D group. I said, "What do you mean?" "Well, my last name is D-I. In Chinese, it's D. In American English is D. So that's the letter D. Sounds like that D. So I know that student quite well, but he did quite poorly in the exam. I asked him what happened. And he told me very excitedly, and he said, Dr. D, I have ADHD. I said, well, good for you. So let me know, why do you think you did not so well in the midterm? And he said, well, it's because I cannot focus. And because of the ADHD, he really couldn't focus, and he lived in a dorm. And then, so I asked him, because my kids take a medication. So I just very openly, I asked him, what do you do to help yourself? He said his doctor gave him so-and-so medication. And I said, why didn't you take it? I said, did you take it before the midterm? He said, no, I didn't. I said, why not? Because it make me drowsy. I don't want to be drowsy. When he's not taking the medication, he's like, cannot focus. So with my own experience with my kids, so I asked him kindly, I said, is it possible for you to take half the dosage of that medication? What would that do to you? And he said, well, I can try that. So he did. He did very well in his final. He ended up with a B. And he also got his master's degree after he finished the undergrad in our program. So with that experience, and I thought, with someone that have kids with autism, with even myself, and I told Chris this too, I always say, everyone is autistic in some way. Like me, I'm very visual. I cannot set my watch to the digital because I cannot remember the time. I have to have the face show me here, and that will give me an imprint of the time. So when I do my experiments, I can be multitasking. I can do several experiments at the same time because I know when exactly I start the first experiment and I can go on to the next one. So I want to combine my own experience and my teaching experience to let you know that, all of the professors, and I think we have our own ways of understanding how each one of us learns and how we can teach. We'll try our best to teach. And so if there's any question, we can discuss a bit later. But I did tell your student, I told her of my experience of this semester, but I would like to ask this task force to think about it also. So this semester, I had a student. She worked very hard, I know that. And she sent me 1, 2, 3, 4 letters of the accommodation letter from the deans saying I need more exam time. I said, yeah, sure, no problem. We can always arrange. You can take the exam in my lab. You can take whatever long time. We arrange the TA to help her and everything. And then in the end, and being stubborn of me, and I set my grading system with the A, B plus, and I wanted to be by the points system. Above 90, you get A, no matter what that is, right? So in the end, she got a B plus, and she was not very happy about it because she said she deserves an A, but it's 80 some point. It's not 90. I said I cannot give her an A because this is the policy. It's said, and I had to be fair to all the students. We talked for like over an hour. She wanted 1 point here, 1 point there, 1 point there. And I said, I just cannot do that. So I want to ask you, Chris, in our program here, and with our special needs population and neurodiversity students, how do we convey to the students that there are certain rules we have to follow? And yes, we do know that we have the special needs, but we have to be also fair to all of the other students in the same class. And I think we may want to make that a bit clear when we have students register that they need a little bit more help. We'll do whatever we can to help. And but we also need to be fair to all of the other students in the class. Okay, so that's about my professional life. Now, it's a mother with 3 kids and 2 of them with autism. And that's where I got to know Chris more than 10 years ago when Andy was exiting out of the school. And I begged him, please take Andy. Then now I ask him to please take Teddy. And so Teddy, now Andy's in attending the Eden adult program, fantastic program. Now Teddy's gonna start also, and Teddy's quite different from Andy. Andy is someone, I always use my friend's words. If you ever have an autistic kid, you want one like Andy, and that's my Andy. And Teddy is the total opposite. He did have sometimes quite aggressive behaviors in the past few years, and we try our best to manage. Now he's 5'7", 170 some pounds, and this is me. My husband is not too much taller either. We tried our best to manage, but there was time that we couldn't manage. I'm so glad that we have police chief here. We did end up calling police a few times, and I want to let you know, not all the time that the police were called in East Brunswick handle the situation rightly or with what I have learned now. When we make the call, we need to say that this is a autistic kid. And so I think not all the police know that. And they treat this as just some aggression incident and all that. So with that being told, I think things can be handled a bit differently because we had been handled quite roughly by some of the police in the past. So the last incident, and Chris asked me to talk about here, and I want to describe it just a bit to you, and I hope that the whole community, the whole society will understand better, will have more compassion for our special population or neurodiverse population. So when it's about 3 months ago. So started in school, and when he didn't get what he wanted, he got pulling the teacher's hair. And then our school, now you guys know I live in East Brunswick, so East Brunswick High School, and told us that he could not go back to school. So this is quite hard for me. Teddy loves school. Now he was told that he cannot go back to school. And after a whole month, our request, begging, and they finally offered him online classes, thanks to Chris. And I got a lawyer involved, and we got the hours that initially they promised, but that's after 2 months. So anyway, then at home one day, well, most of the time he's great. And then he had an explosive incident. We had to call the police, and the police decided he need to go to the emergency room. So he was sent to the hospital, and I will name the hospital, Robert Wood Johnson Hospital. And of course, once he got there, like I say, not all the time he would be aggressive or not behaving himself. Most time he's great. And I played just a video to Chris before, and also Jeff. He's a great pianist. He finished all of his novels, and he's great. He talks and everything. So once he got to the hospital, he's fine. And that was a Saturday, and Sunday was great. And we demanded to see the psychiatrist, because his attending doctor was a neurologist. I'm a molecular biologist. I talk molecular biologist terms. Neurologists use their neurologist terms. Psychiatrists use their psychiatrist language, right? So we asked to get an evaluation, and that psychiatrist never came. So on Monday, I told my husband, you get there early, because today I had to teach, so you can meet with the psychiatrist. So finally, my husband met with the psychiatrist, with the social worker there, which we never got to meet. 2 nights, I waited until 1 a.m. They never came up. I am being critical here with our health system, because I complained. I made official complaint to our hospital, including next what I'm about to tell you. So they came, and the psychiatrist told my husband, he's perfectly fine, nothing wrong with him. He's just being autistic. So he needs to be released. And my husband said, you haven't even done any evaluation. We would like to see your opinion, and different opinion. Should we change his medication? Should we do so and so and so? She said, no, you need to take him home. And the words that followed really hurt us. The social worker told us, if you don't pick him up, he's going to be sent to a homeless shelter. I was furious. Sorry, you told me to talk about this, so I want to tell you. I was like, how can anyone say such a thing to a desperate parent. We should be more compassionate. I thought all of our health workers are compassionate. So the point I want to bring here is how can we educate or make sure at least our health workers, police officers, and the society understand the diverse of our neural differences, and how can we better treat them, and how can we better communicate with parents, teachers, and fellow workers and fellow students. It's quite important, in my opinion, at least, you know, that moment we were lost in words. So we had to pick him up. We took him home, and sure enough, that same 3 hours later, we had to send him back to the hospital again. And they still didn't do anything in the hospital. So we took him back. But then we learned, we changed our own doctor. We changed to a really quite nice psychiatrist with the change of medication and education program. We set up all sorts of programs, and that took a lot of parents' energy and time, but we learn, we know how to do this, and we will do it, right? And I want to let you know, Teddy's great. Most of the time, he's great anyway. So he's, and the education program is continuing, and the adult program is set up. But I want to share the, it's Chris requested me, so I want to share that experience with you from a parent perspective, and also from an educator perspective. And I hope we can continue this conversation in some way. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. D. And absolutely, I asked Dr. D to be here to highlight kind of the complexity and the very different critical priorities facing the neurodiverse community. You know, as I've said, you know, many times, the RCAS exists to amplify the voices of neurodivergent people, but it also exists to stand up for people, for neurodivergent people who can't stand up for themselves. And there are, you know, many people with autism who do suffer from severe challenging behavior. That's not their choice. It's not that, you know, Teddy chooses to be aggressive or engage in self-injury. It's something he is suffering from. And again, he's not suffering from autism. Autism isn't the problem here. The problem is a lack of resources, a lack of places, you know, for parents to bring their adult children to get critical therapeutic treatment. And as I said earlier, our fourth unit, the intensive outpatient clinic, which will be opening soon, will hopefully be an excellent resource for parents who do have nowhere else to go and are kind of stuck in this cycle between weathering, you know, a dangerous situation at home and calling the police and going to the hospital and, you know, starting that cycle all over again. So thank you, Dr. D, for sharing that very personal, very important kind of perspective. And so last, but certainly not least, I would love to, again, another great pleasure to introduce once more, Dr. Mark Robson, who is a Board of Governors, distinguished university professor, and yada, 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 right? Like every potential award ever potentially given at Rutgers, Mark has gotten it. And he's the best mentor ever.
That was very nice, Chris. You're always very kind to me. It's a real privilege to be part of the task force, and I really appreciate it. And I guess my perspective is as a faculty member, and also someone who 68 years ago, my mom said, well, you know, your son has ADHD. And, you know, back in the 50s, nobody else in the room is as old as I am, I know. But the easy thing to do is write a script for Ritalin, you know, and my mother resisted that for a while because she just was uncomfortable with that. And my chief cop came 31 years ago. I came 49 years ago. So I was already old when you got here, Chief. And it's been a privilege to be at Rutgers and teach. But one of the things that's so important is to be a better teacher, you have to understand the students that you're teaching, and you have to understand their needs. And the needs are great. And, you know, when Julietta gave the statistics today, I honestly fell out of my chair on that one. I assume maybe 5% of our student population is all I have. You know, I'm a toxicologist, you know, we were pretty straightforward. Either you're dead or alive. You can usually, it's not hard to be right or wrong, but instead I underestimated that by half. And so we need to know as faculty members what the needs of our students are and how you address them properly. When I first started teaching classes, I taught very small specialized classes. Now I'm pretty senior. And so I teach I have 260 students each semester in plants and people. And so you get a real diverse group of students with a large, diverse background of students. And I'll have 10 to 12 students each time with a letter of accommodation. But what I've had to learn is how to make sure I meet the accommodation and meet it properly. When we first started teaching, we didn't know what to do as faculty. You know, but as faculty, we don't admit we don't know what to do. We just say, oh yes, I have no idea. Then CAPS came along in more recent times. So anytime a student had a special need, whether they had a financial crisis at home, whether they had a neurodiverse issue, or just even something more serious with an addiction problem, we sent the kids to CAPS. Now that's and then people say, well, you know, the CAPS folks aren't doing enough. No, the CAPS folks are doing everything, and sometimes that's not the place to send the students for help. So I guess my goal and my interest in being on this task force, aside from my enormous affection and respect for Chris, is the fact that as a faculty member, I want to do a better job. As somebody who's been an administrator for a long time, I want to mentor my early career faculty so that they can do better jobs too, because we need to know what to do. And just two quick little examples so we can get into the Q&A, which is the most important part, is what I didn't realize when I started teaching these larger classes, and I would have students, some of whom would come up and be very candid, like our students today. I thought you were also very courageous and told us about your experience. And they'd say, you know, Dr. Robson, this is my concern and this is my problem, and we'd accommodate it. Sometimes I wouldn't learn about that till after the fact. In those big classes, even if you did something like, okay, I'm going to, change the sequence of lectures. I mean, it's all on PowerPoint, it's all on Canvas, but I decided to move it because I thought it made more sense. There would be students that would come up and say, well, I've already gone through the lecture and done the assessment. Now you've changed it. And they were visibly upset. So I learned I have to plan better. And once I make the contract and say, hey, this is the syllabus, it's not a movable feast. This is the syllabus, we're going to do this. I also learned, and it was interesting because several of our students and presenters today talked about the noise disturbance. Be very mindful of what's going on in the classroom noise-wise. I mean, it distracts me, but I just thought it was me because of my ADHD. I realize it affects lots of people. And to make sure that you keep the volume right, you keep the lights right, all those things which, individually maybe don't seem like a lot, but when you put it in an aggregate way, it contributes to the classroom environment, it contributes to the success of the student, and it makes sure that everybody is going to succeed. And also, when you have a student that asks for an accommodation, be thoughtful and accommodate that student. Several people talked about how important it is not to over accommodate, and I agree with you. People want to be treated with respect and dignity. They've acknowledged that they need this accommodation. You need to acknowledge that you know that and you're going to do it, and then you go forward. Everyone needs to be treated as equally as possible with as much respect and dignity as possible. And so for me, I think it's a chance to educate other faculty, to help people understand that it is, almost 1/10 of our student population. And if that's the percent in our student population, you have to assume it's also the percentage among those of us on faculty and the folks on staff. I think it makes me feel very good that at Rutgers, we are addressing this. This is very much to Chris's credit and the people that Chris works with and the wonderful team here to be standing in this wonderful building. I've been here so long, and even you remember this, Chief. This was the Corwin Horseshoes, and to see it transform to something like this means that we're serious about it. Okay, to meet the people that are staffing this operation shows you that we're serious about it. So you need to instruct us, maybe just not today in the Q&A, we run out of time, but email us, let us know. Henry was so candid and shared his experience, but we need to hear more of those things that we can respond properly, thoughtfully, and respectfully. So thanks a lot. And even though it's late in the day, you're all pretty much awake, which beats the hell out of most of my undergraduate classes.
All right, thank you, Mark. And we may run a little over. So the program says 2:30. That's still early in the day. So for those of you that can stay, hopefully our panelists can hang out an extra 10 to 15 minutes. And now's the time for the town hall Q&A. So if any of you have questions, please raise your hand. Juliet, I'll come over to you with a microphone. Please indicate who your question is for.
Hi, so my question is for Chief Kenneth Kopp, because I've had certainly some unpleasant experiences with police officers where well, just one in particular, where I was pulled over and I didn't really know for speeding, and I didn't know how to communicate my feelings at all. Long story short, I ended up screaming and crying, and I was definitely afraid of how he was going to handle it. And, you know, I wish I'd gotten the chance to say thank you for how well he handled it. But I was just wondering, like, have you or any other police officers at Rutgers sort of discussed what to do if if a student or somebody who has to be like pulled over for speeding or pulled over for, or just talked to for whatever reason, how to handle if they had like that kind of reaction? Because it wasn't stimming. I know that you had talked about stimming earlier. This wasn't a stim attack. It was like a panic attack that I had. So I just wanted to ask if you'd ever had that experience, talked about it.
Sure. Sure. Yeah, we have standard protocols that are in place during traffic stops, but our really our overriding principles is communication, and judging what makes a person feel comfortable. Meaning, maybe we take a couple steps back, let that person vent a little bit, and then, you know, kind of gauge into or go into reassurance and letting them know that everything's going to be okay. You know, if there's signs of medical issues, we may call an ambulance. You know, we may do something like that. But I think, you know, that's part of the give and take of training. You know, we have to learn a lot from the community, especially the neurodivergent community. And I think, you know, certainly we can educate the community on what is typical responses from us, so that, you know, there really are no surprises. The good news is everything we do is taped and recorded. And that's pretty standard across the state of New Jersey now. We've had recording in place since 2016 for body cameras. And in the early 2000s, we've had our vehicles with recording devices. So there's always a quality control mechanism that's going on. But it's important, if anyone ever comes across an issue like that where, you know, they want some feedback, there's an opportunity to do that. Like a department like ours, you can come on in and we'll talk about it. You know, we'll pull the tape and we'll take a look at it. So, you know, in response, yes, we have protocols. We do a system called ICAT. It's integrated communication and tactics. Okay. The number one thing for us, time is usually on our side. We want to communicate. We want to engage in that communication. So we de-escalate. That's our overriding principle.
Thanks, Chief. Anyone have another question?
Hey, everybody. On? Is it on? Oh, it is on? My name is Jeff Friedman. I'm an associate professor of dance studies in Mason Grove School of the Arts. And one of the things I've been impressed with today is that there have been so many comments by several folks, including Henry, because I told him, that quotes that people have said that have really been very much connecting me in the question that I have for all of us about what are the role of the arts in regards to neurodiversity. And Chris and I have had many conversations, and Courtney has been very supportive, and others in terms of setting up some dance classes, but I'm sure there's other ways in which we can certainly serve folks. One of the things that Chris said early on was that, and I'm just sort of paraphrasing here, the psychological, physical, and emotional toll of appearing neurotypical, and the kind of toll it takes on people. It was very striking to me because it seems to me that the arts often provide a safe space in which the inner emotions, and this goes back to the student, the discussion about the ways in which emotions are there, but not always apparent. The chance to use the arts as a tool to help those inner emotions actually come forward and place in a safe environment in which they can express themselves in the various disciplines. And that includes dance, music, theater, and art and design. And we do have, and this goes actually to, I think, other people's point, that there are some online classes at Rutgers Arts Online, in case that's a better delivery system. But I'm just wondering whether or not there's more that we could be doing. And it could be a discussion that the task force can take on, and I'm happy to talk to them more. But if you have any comments about that, I'm interested to hear them.
So Jeff, if you don't mind, I'd actually like to respond initially, just because, you know, you and I have been talking about this for a long while. So I can't agree more that the arts should be seen as a critical component of a comprehensive approach to supporting the success of neurodiverse people. Neurodiverse people should get access to the arts, just like any person at Rutgers or otherwise should get access to the arts. I think the critical shame and issue is that arts often take resources and funding for the arts, often take a backseat to other initiatives. They're not always seen as critically important as, you know, again, more therapeutic, clinical, mental health services or employment supports or other forms of social supports or even recreation. And I think that's misguided. You know, I also think that I know, and Jeff, Jeff has been fighting really hard to develop an accessible dance program for neurodiverse people, and have actually had some real great success running an initial class. But it's been difficult. It's because, again, finding resources, you know, where students who have never done dance before, who don't even know if they would like doing dance, you know, have the opportunity to do that without a cost, right? It's sometimes that part of the trouble of being someone who's neurodiverse is you get excluded from opportunities for really meaningful recreation and leisure and arts from an early age. And, you know, by the time you reach adulthood, from a lack of opportunities to engage, like you might not even know if that's something you would enjoy, and you might be far behind your same age peers in terms of your ability to do those things. So again, just echoing and amplifying your statement about how critically important it is, and certainly looking forward to working with you to try and continue to identify resources. And I'm hopeful that at some point, that's another area that the university in particular might support in a real way through investment and access.
Okay, yeah, so that's exactly what I wanted to come here to talk to Chris for Teddy for, which I shown Jeff how Teddy plays the piano. He's really great. And he showed this music interest when he was like a baby. So when now Cindy started learning piano, Teddy was just a baby, and he was always very attentive to that. And he really could not talk until after he was 1 year or 1.5, but he could sing. He would hum to the tunes, and we know exactly which song he was humming to. So some of them do have that intuitive tuning specifically to music, which is great because music is a great way for people to relieve, you know, their extra energy or to be focused in that area. For me, I don't like noise. I'm very bothered by noise. That's my autistic side, and also smell. I'm very sensitive to that. But music to Teddy is a great, not just a pastime. It's also because he's so good in playing piano that gives him a great sense of joy and achievement and enhance his self-esteem. We could see that. I told Chris the time when he was in the playing the concert of the Octopus music program, he played his 2 songs, and we practiced him to bow after he finished, right? When he finished, he forgot. He just ran down, and I talked to the director. I said, can you please allow him to play 1 more? And he said, no problem. So when everybody finished, and Teddy went up, played 1 more song, and he bowed, and he came back and ran into me saying, I bowed. The whole hall applauded. That made him feel so happy. He loved it. So this kind of, well, that's particularly just for Teddy, right? but I can tell you from Teddy's perspective, from what we have been teaching him, and I can tell you music is very important to him, and he enjoys it. And so now I ask Chris, can we set up programs or music lessons for kids like Teddy or for anybody else that would love to learn more here or at Rutgers, because we have all the resources. And I can add a little bit more here. Yes, it all takes money. And I can tell you some of them now for adults, we have the DDD funding. I just told Chris, and then they calculate everything out and say, we have the fund for Teddy to continue music lessons. So that can be funded. So if you have the class here, it can be paid through the budgets. So that's something to think about. And I would love to help if you, we can do something like this. It would be fantastic about this.
So I will just say that Rutgers Community Arts actually offers a pretty good scholarship program separate from your specific funding. So there are opportunities for Rutgers Community Arts that they do have scholarship funds. And I will say that the Chancellor of New Brunswick has also funded the Integrated Dance Collaboratory for 3 years at a significant amount of money, and we are also subsidizing tuition. So there are opportunities if there are interests, and I'd certainly be happy to provide any of that information to folks. So yeah. Also, just to say that we're producing an event in September, a dance group, and we're actually creating a template for what we will call a sensory-friendly environment in the theater. And there will be STEM kits and low STEM spaces and these kinds of things and accessibility. So it's just an opportunity that the New Brunswick Performing Arts Center is going to be setting up with us for the first time. So if you're interested, I'd be happy to provide that information, because I want to serve this community.
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff. And thanks for your continued advocacy for greater accessibility in the arts for neurodiverse folks here in our community.
Chris, I want to borrow something that Jeff said and go back to Cameron's comments when he was on the panel, which is not arts focused as much as a really important point that both of you brought up, which I have to admit, until I heard you both mention today, I never thought of this. This is why I show up at these things, to learn something. Is I have to tell you that I never considered how important an online class where it gives the students that security, privacy, and lack of distraction, how important that is. Hey, here we go. No, you taught me today, kiddo. But this is important because, so as somebody who advises students, and I'm old and kind of folksy, there's very few advantages to being old, trust me. But one or two of them is that people will actually come to you fairly frequently for some advice. And I would have never thought to suggest to a person who shared that they're neurodiverse that's the way to go. And so now I learned that. And as somebody who has some administrative responsibility, I will encourage people to at least make that option available, especially for classes we know are critical for people to finish. So that was a very important teachable moment on your parts to me. And I don't think that most of us as faculty have thought about that. So that's what we'll put in a workshop that we'll do for faculty, is to say, consider this, and consider that this is not just, most people taking online just want to get it over with. My summer class, it's 3 pounds of bananas in a 1 pound bag. No, this is a chance for a student who wants to take the class and he or she is really interested in it, but this gives them a level of comfort and security that just going to help make the experience better. So thank you both. This was really good.
And I'm really hopeful that the university invests in the creation of more classroom spaces that allow for hybrid, right? Where some students can attend in person, but there can be students attending remotely and virtually who are able to get the same or at least similar experience of being in the room with the other students. And it takes some doing, technologically speaking, and many of our buildings are aging, but it seems like a good opportunity for upgrading the infrastructure of that technology. So thank you. Other questions? Yeah.
Not so much a question, but a comment. I think that we are at a really great time. You're speaking, Chris, about creating these new buildings. So everything, the strategic plan included, everything that we talk about from this point forward, this should be the starting point of always thinking about the things we are learning here, which is the spaces that neurodiverse people need. The fact that online was really just brought because of a pandemic, but now we really need to integrate it in a way that is the fabric of our community. I think having these conversations, and I'm hoping that some of this will be part of the next strategic plan.
And we thought we couldn't do online, and then when we had no choice, we still got a ways to go, but I mean, we got there and we have something that's actually quality. And then when we had some instructional design people teach us how to put it in the clothes, we began to make, and then we had people evaluate how accessible it really was. And, I think, yeah, we're making progress, but you're right. This is probably the best time to have the discussion. We're coming out of the pandemic. People are feeling like there's a chance to do it better and to do it with a lot of enthusiasm. No better time than now. I agree with you. Let's exploit that. And, you had the chancellor, you had the vice chancellor, you had a lot of people and they stayed too. They didn't say hello and run out the door. They stayed and listened. That's an incredibly, trust me, I sit through thousands of these things. That's really impressive that the people in the front office are staying for a significant portion of the program and listening and making comments that are meaningful. And I think that just says we're in the right place at the right time.
We did it because it was necessary, but listening, we have to ask the questions and then listen to the answers. What do students in general want? And so this was a perfect, introduction to that. Absolutely.
So just regarding that, Courtney actually is participating in a potential grant proposal that we're working on in regards to offering a completely online dance class for people with neurodiversity that is relating to teaching and learning at STAR regarding adding gamification, so that there would be incentives actually for people who have neurodiversity identities would be able to be incentivized to go through the online course, through the sort of opportunities to earn badges, to experience the gamification that makes it more fun in a way that really works. So that may be something that we could generalize in the future, not just for the art, but for any kind of course.
Thank you all. These are all incredible perspectives, and this is absolutely the right time to be sharing these for the record, because these are all today's events. The work of the task force over this prior semester will all be summarized in the context of a white paper or report, and will be provided to the university administration for further review. Does anyone have additional questions for any of our panelists? So I have a question for Dr. Robson. So Dr. Robson talked about his own experience of having ADHD today and being neurodiverse. And I'm wondering if that's something he feels comfortable discussing openly with senior faculty and colleagues at the university, and if he's ever been made to feel different for his traits as a neurodiverse person at Rutgers.
So I've been honest about, and those of us who, and someone made the comment earlier, and I think they meant it with a lot of honesty and seriousness, is that, most of us have traits that, I don't know who the non-neurodiverse person is, because I feel I have those qualities, and most of the colleagues I work with. I think, if you choose this line of work, Jeff, there's intensity in your field in the arts. I'm a toxicologist. We're intense too. We're not as interesting, but we're intense. So, I think that's part of being an academic. So I've always done that. But I was saying to James earlier too, I get very anxious. I was teased early on. I always sit in the back row at the end. I'm not antisocial. I just need my space, and I'll get up and walk around because I have to. And my attention span is, I end my classes sometimes earlier than others, because I'll tell students, we're done, and I can see the kids have already, one of them have fallen asleep anyway. But, it really is, you have to be honest about it. I mean, I don't put a little sign up. But if people ask, I tell them, and I tell them how important it is. I also tell them to be patient. And that's why I'm so impressed that our RUPD is looking at that, because they get involved in so many kinds of calls. If I see a student in class, we can figure out what the problem might be. But, if the police are called, it could be a wide range of things, and it could be, life and safety. And it's very hard for that police officer to make that decision. And he or she has to decide, is this a person who really has a violent behavior? Is it related to some kind of substance abuse, or is the person just having a bad day? And you ask that person to make all those decisions in 5 seconds. And that's a lot to ask anybody to do. So I think that it's important to remind people that they should be more patient. There are, since we're being candid, I've been a department chair twice, And we talk about, especially large classes with, in our department. Our department was, Dee and I are in the same department. At one point, we had 66 folks in our department, and we teach a lot of large class. It's bigger than your school. And, older faculty, I can say that because I'm old, older faculty say, oh, well, they're lazy. Well, that's a horrible statement to make. And they don't understand. They don't take even a minute to understand what that student might be going through, or you hear really offensive comments that are so negative about someone's behavior that, just totally inappropriate. And you wonder, how could somebody, go to an Ivy League school and get a PhD and be so incredibly inappropriate? But they're here on the payroll. So you have to educate people. And I usually will give my own example, not to look like I'm, throwing myself up on the wall, but to remind people that all of us have some interesting challenges and we can manage them, we can take care of them, but we also need to be appreciative of the other folks we work with. And I think that's the important thing. You got to tell the truth, you got to be honest about it. And also the other challenge you can't do though is, especially with our students, is like overdo it, to overcompensate. The student tells you he or she has a problem, they need a little time, they need something, you address it, it's between you and the student. You don't even tell the teaching assistant unless it's absolutely important. That person needs the confidence to know that they shared something really important and intimate with you. You can't betray his or her confidence, because then they just felt that you've made a mockery of their circumstances, and that can't happen.
Thank you, Mark. And again, just to be clear, my purpose in highlighting was I actually think that there are very few models of success in senior faculty who are willing to be transparent about their own identity as a neurodiverse person and the struggles and challenges they've had, or fear of stigma that can occur amongst colleagues. Because again, I think there's this conception of faculty of the prestigious academic who, again, and I think there's this false misconception about being neurodiverse and somehow having less brain power in terms of academic skills. So again, my sincere thanks for
Well,
you.
I will be
being that
honest though, and say that I've been more candid about the challenges further along in my career. I won't say, and Jeff and I were just talking at lunchtime about, issues around promotion and things. You can be much more emboldened, as a distinguished professor than you can as a pre-tenure assistant professor. And that's just the world we live in. So yeah, courage, it's not as courageous as it is just being old, but but it works.
Thanks, Mark. Last call. One more in the back.
I didn't have lunch yet, so I'm a bit tired. So I apologize if I'm I don't know if I can't get the words out, but my question goes for Chelsea, because I remember a while back when I was looking into the IDEA program, I thought it was interesting how it got students to work on very real problems and come up with real solutions, as if the things you were learning were more tangible. So my question for you, Chelsea, is there anything the IDEA program does that kind of stands out to you in terms of accommodating students who are neurodiverse? I don't know. Ask me to clarify if I'm not making sense.
Yeah. So the question is, does IDEA accommodate for neurodiverse students?
Oh, it's more I don't want to use so I want to use the word pedagogy, but I know some people may not know the word pedagogy, but it's I guess is the way you learn in the IDEA program, because you're working on a project, right? Is there something you could see in other classes or other learning spaces that the IDEA program does that really inspires you, or that makes it unique, or that makes you think about how we teach neurodivergent students?
Yeah, so the IDEA program is really good because it gives you, we're really big on ill-defined problems, right? So you have a bit, you are in a problem and you can go in any direction, and basically you have the autonomy to solve the problem the way you want. And I think that would work for for like academic spaces with neurodiverse students, because you have like the ability to approach a problem how you see fit and like what's most comfortable to you. Not exactly most comfortable, but how you feel like you can approach it best. So it gives like space for individuality and like creativity that can be seen around all academic spaces.
Thank you.
Awesome. Great question. And thank you all for hanging out to the end of our agenda today. And just please one more round of applause for our final panelists, including, of course, Chief Kenneth Kopp, who had to leave because he's our chief of police. And just again, to Mark's point, the RUPD chief of police was here for the entire program. If that's not investment and commitment and dedication, I don't know what is. Again, thank you all for coming here to our very first event hosted in the RCAS. I think it was a huge success, and it's all because of all of you. So thank you very much. Enjoy the long weekend, and please be well. Thank you.